When someone doesn't value you anymore, try this simple trick and watch what happens. Stoicism. Hook. There is a moment most people never talk about. It is not dramatic. There is no argument, no door slamming, no final words exchanged. It is quieter than all of that. It is the moment you realize, with complete clarity, that someone who once made you feel important has stopped trying. They still exist in your life, in your phone, in your memories, maybe even in your home, but something invisible has shifted. You feel it in the way they respond to your messages with half-hearted words. You feel it in the silence where enthusiasm used to live. You feel it in the way they look through you instead of at you. And in that moment, most people make the same mistake. They chase. They explain. They shrink themselves to fit into a space that was never meant to hold them. Today, we are going to talk about what the Stoics would do instead, and why that single shift will change everything. The trap of seeking validation from those who no longer see you. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to catch up to. You cannot control how others perceive you, but you have absolute dominion over how you respond to being perceived. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers who ever lived, wrote in his private journals, what we now call meditations, that very few things are as dangerous to a person's peace as placing their self-worth in the hands of another human being. When someone stops valuing you, the instinctive human response is to ask, what did I do wrong? And while self-reflection has its place, this question, when born out of panic and desperation, leads you deeper into a trap. It makes the other person the judge of your worth. It hands them a power they were never qualified to hold. The Stoic trick is not manipulation. It is not playing hard to get. It is something far more radical. It is the complete and total withdrawal of your emotional dependence on their opinion of you. What the Stoics actually taught about worth. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most powerful philosophical voices in human history, taught that there are two categories of things in life: things within our control, and things outside our control. Our opinions, our desires, our choices, our responses, these belong to us. The opinions of others, the behavior of others, the love or indifference of others, these do not. Now here is where people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it means becoming cold, detached, robotic. They think it means pretending you do not feel the sting of being overlooked or dismissed. That is not what Stoicism teaches at all. Stoicism teaches you to feel the pain fully, to acknowledge it honestly, and then to refuse to let it govern your actions. You are allowed to grieve the version of the relationship that once existed. You are allowed to feel the weight of being undervalued. But you are not allowed, according to the Stoic framework, to let that grief become the architect of your decisions. The simple trick: become radically devoted to yourself. Here is the trick the Stoics would recommend. Not revenge. Not silence as a power play. Not a carefully crafted speech designed to make the other person realize what they are losing. The trick is this: redirect every ounce of energy you were spending on seeking their approval, and pour it entirely into yourself. This sounds simple. It is not. Because your nervous system has been conditioned to seek connection, and when a source of connection withdraws, your brain treats it like a threat to survival. The pull to chase, to fix, to explain, it is almost biological. But Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The person who no longer values you is not your obstacle. Your attachment to their validation is the moment you genuinely turn your focus inward, not as a strategy to make them want you back, but as an authentic commitment to your own growth. Something remarkable happens. You stop being dependent on their gaze, and you start building a life so full, so grounded, so deeply yours, that their absence becomes irrelevant. Why this is harder than it sounds. Let us be honest here, because the Stoics were always honest, even when it was uncomfortable. Withdrawing your need for someone's validation is extraordinarily difficult when you still love them, when history is woven between you, when you can remember a version of this relationship that felt like warmth and safety. It is especially hard in a world that constantly tells you love means fighting for people, never giving up, proving your worth through persistence. But there is a difference between healthy persistence and desperate clinging. Healthy persistence is choosing someone daily when they are also choosing you. Desperate clinging is continuing to knock on a door that someone has quietly decided to keep closed. The Stoics would tell you that wisdom begins the moment you can tell the difference. Seneca, in his letters, wrote about the danger of wasting our most precious resource, not money, not status, but time, on people and situations that are no longer serving our highest good. You are not being asked to be heartless. You are being asked to be wise. The Stoic concept of self-respect is a practice. One of the most underrated Stoic concepts is the idea of dignity, not as something granted to you by others, but as something you actively practice within yourself. When someone no longer values you, they are not taking your dignity. You only lose your dignity when you begin to perform for people who are not watching, when you bend and contort yourself trying to reignite a flame that the other person has already decided to let go out. The Stoic practice of dignity means you carry yourself the same way whether someone is celebrating you or ignoring you. It means your posture does not collapse because someone stopped looking. It means you still pursue excellence, still invest in your craft, still show up for your own life, not to prove anything to anyone, but because that is simply who you have chosen to be. This is not pride. This is not ego. This is the deep, quiet self-respect of someone who has decided that their value is not negotiable. What happens when you stop chasing? Now here is the part that feels like magic but is actually just human psychology aligning with Stoic wisdom. When you genuinely stop chasing someone who has devalued you, and this only works when it is genuine, not strategic, the entire dynamic shifts. People are drawn to those who are rooted in themselves. There is something profoundly attractive about someone who does not need your validation to stand tall. When you withdraw your desperate energy and replace it with peaceful self-investment, one of two things tends to happen. Either the other person begins to notice the absence of your pursuit and genuinely reconsiders, not because you played a game, but because your growth is visible and undeniable. Or they do not return, and you discover, perhaps to your own surprise, that you no longer need them to both outcomes or victories. The Stoics knew this. True strength is not convincing others to value you. True strength is arriving at a place where you value yourself so deeply that the question of whether others do begins to lose its urgency. The role of silence in Stoic wisdom. There is a particular kind of silence the Stoics revered, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has decided their energy is too valuable to spend on people who do not appreciate it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly. In his role as emperor, he was surrounded by flatterers, critics, and people who shifted their loyalty like weather. He did not chase their approval. He did not perform for their attention. He returned, daily, to his own internal standards. He asked himself not, what do they think of me? But, am I living in alignment with virtue? That question, that single redirection, is the foundation of Stoic emotional freedom. When you stop filling the silence with explanations, justifications, and pleas, you create space. And in that space, your real self, the self that does not need to be validated to exist, begins to grow louder and clearer. Building a life that speaks for itself. The most powerful thing you can do when someone stops valuing you is to build a life so rich, so purposeful, so deeply aligned with who you truly are, that it becomes the loudest statement you never had to make. This is not about showing off. This is not about posting curated moments online to make someone regret their indifference. This is about the private, daily discipline of investing in yourself. Read the books you have been putting off. Pursue the skill you have been too distracted to develop. Strengthen the friendships that have been waiting for your attention. Take care of your body with the kind of consistency that only comes when you stop pouring your energy into emotional turmoil. The Stoics believed deeply in continuous self-improvement, not to become more attractive to others, but to become more aligned with your own potential. When you do this sincerely, something in your posture, your energy, your presence changes. You begin to carry yourself differently, and the world responds accordingly. Understanding the other person without excusing them. Stoicism also calls us to something that is genuinely difficult, understanding, without excusing. The person who has stopped valuing you is likely operating from their own wounds, their own fears, their own unexamined patterns. This does not make their behavior acceptable. It does not mean you should stay in a dynamic that diminishes you. But it does mean that carrying hatred or obsessive resentment toward them is only harming you. Epictetus reminded his students that anger is always a double punishment. You suffer the original wound, and then you suffer again by replaying it endlessly in your mind. The Stoic path is to understand, release, and move. To look at the situation clearly, acknowledge what it was and what it is, grieve what needs grieving, and then, with every ounce of discipline you possess, turn your face toward the life that is still waiting for you ahead. The long game of self-worth. Here is the truth that most motivational content will not tell you. Rebuilding your sense of self-worth after being devalued is not a weekend project. It is a long, sometimes monotonous, sometimes exhilarating practice. There will be days when the Stoic wisdom feels distant and the old familiar ache of wanting to reach out returns with full force. On those days, the practice is not to feel nothing. The practice is to feel everything and still choose your highest self anyway. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for public acclaim. He wrote them as a daily discipline of returning to his values when the world, and his own emotions, pulled him in other directions. Consider starting your own version of that practice. Write down, each morning, the kind of person you are committed to being that day. Not for anyone else, purely for yourself. Over time, this practice builds an internal architecture of self-respect so solid that no one person's indifference can shake its foundations. A final word to you. If you are watching this right now because someone in your life has made you feel less than you are, less important, less interesting, less worthy of time and attention, I want you to hear this clearly. Their diminished view of you is not the truth about you. It is information about where they are. The Stoics did not believe in a life spent chasing approval, because they understood that approval, when it finally arrives, never fills the hole that the seeking created. The only thing that fills that hole is you, your choices, your discipline, your commitment to living with integrity whether or not anyone is watching or applauding. Try the Stoic trick, not as manipulation, not as a game, but as a genuine act of self-reclamation. Withdraw your desperate energy, pour it into yourself. Watch what happens, not to them, but to you. Watch how your world begins to shift when you stop being the one who needs, and start being the one who simply, quietly, powerfully as if this spoke to something in you. Subscribe to this channel right now. Every week, we go deeper into Stoic wisdom that will transform the way you think, feel, and move through the world. Hit the subscribe button and join a community of people who are choosing to live differently. Your next video is already waiting for you.